Thank you for joining RPI Consultants CloudSuite Technology Panel. I'm your host, Richard Leigh Stout, and I'm excited to welcome my esteemed RPI colleagues to share their expertise with you, and I thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules implementing Infor FSM and Infor HCM. Today, I am joined by Chip Cunningham, Chirag Mittal, Aaron Epps, John Gustafson, Seth Sheik, Chris Rosen, and Jeremy Stoltzfus, all practicing consultants with CloudSuite implementation experience. Welcome, team, and thanks for joining. We've prepared a number of talking points based upon common client questions and real-world project challenges to get us started, and we're happy to answer specific questions from our audience as well. Please use the question box in On24 to submit a question. Now, let's kick it off with our first topic. We get a lot of questions about the differences in administering CloudSuite compared to Lawson. The role of the system administrator is vastly different, moving to multi-tenant software as a service, but critical nonetheless. Chip, what can you tell us about sysadmin responsibilities?
Yeah, the system administration duties are definitely different between what Lawson customers are used to and the CloudSuite application. First and foremost, you're not going to be using thick clients or command line access to administrate the system. And there are a lot of duties that you have to perform in the new system that are not unlike the duties you had to perform in the old system. So that means that you will still need a system administrator to administer security, ensure integration points, are transmitting data, and monitor the system going forward. In CloudSuite, these duties will be performed inside the application through the web layer. And at a high level, client administration responsibilities include async administration, security and access, managing client-created flows, configurations, and integrations. And rather than running through a job queue, batch process will be managed via the async queue. And the async queue is a lot like the job scheduler and Lawson S3. These jobs can fail, and so the system administrator will need to monitor and troubleshoot failed or long-running jobs. Also, user security is maintained inside a Mingle in a central repository where the system administrator will be responsible for maintaining and updating security. Integrations can be developed in IPA or using Ion. The system administrator will have to monitor the IPA work units and Ion desk for errors and issues. Finally, authentication for CloudSuite is handled on-premise using ADFS, Azure, or any number of other authentication providers. In this case, it's a system administrator's responsibility to handle these issues that arise through this integration.
That sounds like there continues to be daily tasks for a system administrator to keep a live CloudSuite system performing at peak performance. Well, what about during the implementation? What's the sysadmin footprint in project mode?
In project mode, the system administrator needs to be a full-time, fully engaged employee in the project. It's necessary for the client to contribute a full FTE in order to learn the system and administrate it as the project goes on. The way that we run this is we start off with a light footprint on the client side, and then we slowly tail into full administration from the system administrator. I think as the project winds down, and application suites are live, this number should shrink to around half an FTE. And there are several notification features and automations that will allow administration by exception rather than having to go to job queues and check things out. The system administrator should be someone who both understands the Infor system and can contribute another skill to the team, such as developing configurations and process automations.
Great. Well, thanks, Chip. It sounds like security management is a big part of the client's system administration responsibilities. Chirag, can you expand on that? How can reports help with security management? You there, Chirag?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So to start with security, I think we should understand the hierarchy of security and how it is controlled from top to bottom. Starting at the bottom, we have security rules, which allows or restricts access for every user in the business class. These are also known as business rules. Now, every business class can have many security rules. Combination of these business classes with their security rules makes the security class, and then the combination of security classes makes the security role. This security role is then assigned to the user, which gives or restricts access while using the Lawson system. So as I mentioned above, one security role could have multiple security classes, which in turn could have multiple security rules. Now, in order to figure out, which security class and security rule you have to change or create, you need some kind of reporting, which narrows down your search based on your specific need. Lawson has that feature, which is called as security reporting. Now, in order to access security report, you need to have admin access in CloudSuite. To access it, you will have to go to Administration Console, and then you will find the Secureable Object Policy under the Security Reports. Now, there are some features, which you can use while using the security reports, such as the security report can be run in 3 ways. One, you can run it on a user who has multiple security roles. Secondly, you can run it on a security role, which has multiple security classes. And thirdly, you can run it on a security class, which has multiple business classes. So if I talk about the benefits of running security report, it allows you to run a report on a single business class so that you can analyze which security class is giving or restricting access for specific action you want to control. Rather than going through each security class one by one, security report will tell you which security class you have to change to achieve the desired outcome. Within that report, it shows you all the security classes, all the security rules currently present on the security role. If you run the report on a user, then it gives you the list of security roles you have to work on rather than guessing, figuring out which security class you have to change. Now, one thing you should note is the delivered roles needed to run these reports are admin_ST and the security administrator_ST.
All right, thanks, Chirag. Sounds like those security reports are really useful. Infor has a number of different tools available for reporting. Aaron, how do we choose the right tool for the job?
Sure. So, the great thing about CloudSuite is that you've got a number of tools available to you to basically organize and present information to different types of users, right? So in general, the users that are in the system all day, right, interacting with the ERP, updating transactions, right, they need a set of tools to interact with the data, which is going to be different from someone who maybe receives a static PDF, which would also be different from someone who's maybe an analyst or an executive that never actually logs into the ERP. So what we recommend is when you're looking at figuring out what's the right tool for the job, we really recommend that you inventory the different types of information that are needed, and then put those into 3 different buckets. So the first one is what we call work lists, right? So these are items that are interactive and are often used by people that spend a significant portion of their day within the ERP. So they need to query the system, right? They need to get a data set back, and then they need to usually update information that's in there, right? So you want to make sure you identify those, because those require either update access, right, or it requires real-time access to that information, and that's not a solution you want to try to deliver with the traditional reporting tool. The second category is what we think of as traditional reports, right, where you get rows and columns of data that are organized and often distributed statically, often sent via PDFs, etc. And then the last one is dashboards, and so these are role-based. They're interactive, they're highly dynamic, they're often used either for ad hoc analysis of a particular within the business, or for executives to monitor performance for a certain area to see how they're doing. So once you've kind of taken the needs for data and put them into those 3 buckets, then you can do solution mapping, right, and assign a solution to those 3 broad categories of reporting artifacts that you've got. So for example, within CloudSuite, work lists, right, or things that require update or real-time access to the system are often delivered using list views or BIFSM. Reports are delivered using Designer, right, which is a part of the Infor Analytics platform. And you can think of Designer, it's similar to Crystal Reports or a banded reporting tool, right? So if you use something like that in the past, you have the capabilities to deliver those pixel perfect formatted reports. And then lastly, the dashboards or the ad hoc analysis. You have Visualizer included in the Infor Analytics platform, which is going to allow you to create those highly interactive web-based dashboards and analytics that you can distribute throughout the organization. So you've got a Swiss Army knife of capabilities, and we recommend breaking it into those 3 different buckets and then solution mapping the right tool for the right job. So you make sure you meet expectations for your end users.
All right. Well, thanks, Aaron. Reporting and getting data out of the system to feed other systems, that's a hot topic. Blurring the line between a report and an interface, there's a feature of Global HR called the file creation utility. John, can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, thanks. The file creation utility is really a great tool that was introduced in version 11.07 of Infor HCM, and it is available for both your on-premise and your multi-tenant cloud customers. This tool allows for efficient creation of export files to be sent to any vendors that you may have. There are many benefits of using the file creation utility, and some of those benefits include you don't need to create an individual IPA flow so that you don't need to use the Infor Process Designer. This is convenient so that you can have your HRIS team or other non-development IT members creating these exports. There are also very simple and straightforward steps to creating the files. The process of selecting what records to include, how to change the values if needed, such as employment status, and what the layout should be is actually very simple to understand and perform. The process to determine what records to include is also very customizable. You'll create custom groups to determine what records to look at for the inclusion of the file, and then you can use individual filters further along to determine what data is included. There's even an option to include all records that meet the criteria or just new records since the last time the export was created. This works especially great for benefit exports where you just want to send an insurance vendor the new or changed records in your system. These exports can be run on demand or they can be scheduled. So this is a great feature as most interfaces run on a schedule, and it's nice to be able to get these running when you want them. They can also easily be exported from one environment and imported into another one. This makes it very simple to create and test these exports in a test environment and then migrate them to your production environment. And probably the best part is all of these exports can utilize one generic IPA flow that will then use configurations to determine where to send the file once it's completed. The benefit of this is that you only need to create one IPA flow or modify the delivered flow for the file creation utility. And that performs all the steps of sending the files to whatever vendors you may have. This makes it so that you get the benefits of using IPA flows to automatically deliver the file, but you do not need to create multiple flows. And if you do use ION, you can use this to populate ION as well. The file creation utility can only be used with Infor HCM and can only get data from certain business classes. The business classes that are currently included are the ones that Infor has selected as ones that they think would normally be used for sending employee demographic and benefit information. Some of those business classes are employee benefit, employee transaction history, job, position, supervisor. But it can also use some of the selected export files to create these files, such as the employee balance export, federal health export, and the HR organization export.
Right. Thanks, John. That file creation utility sounds super useful for HCM interfaces. Certainly a feature that deserves more attention. Another feature of CloudSuite that we're impressed with is Infor document management. Seth, what do clients need to know about IDM?
Yes, Richard. So Infor document management, or IDM for short, contains some really cool features and functionalities that will drastically improve the way people manage important business documents. Now, before I go over those features, let's first off talk about what exactly is Infor document management, or more commonly known as IDM. So in a nutshell, it's a document repository that's built into Infor's operating system and allows users to maintain business rules for creating documents, as well as viewing, editing, and storing physical files. Now, IDM contains a standard library of different document types that are delivered to the CloudSuite Financials application. IDM also provides support for the entire lifecycle of a business document, from input through storage, retrieval, and sharing. Furthermore, you can edit document parameters and attributes within the IDM client application, as well as directly in Microsoft Office. Also, for those of you who've ever worked with Google Docs, IDM also similarly allows you to collaborate with other users through Infor Mingle, and just like Google Docs, it automatically saves everything you do to the cloud and gives you access to previous iterations of your document.
IDM sounds like a great place to store and share documents and images relating to business transactions tracked in CloudSuite FSM. But how do we get these images into IDM?
So IDM has a really cool feature called document capture. And basically what this does is that it allows you to capture, scan, and store an invoice image file together with data that is extracted from the invoice. This file can then be automatically shown in the correct context in a corresponding Infor application, or it can kick off automatic workflows for processing. Furthermore, if a client has an existing on-premise scanning or capture solution, it integrates with CloudSuite, and on top of that, some of the leading data capture solutions also pair well with IDM. Lastly, RPI has developed an integration service called Yoga Connect to integrate third-party scanning and data capture software with Infor FSM that imports the image into IDM and creates the corresponding payables invoice record. Overall, Infor's document management is an extremely powerful tool that can transform how organizations manage important business documents.
Thanks, Seth. IDM is a great example of one of the many new technologies baked into the CloudSuite platform, where, in the Lawson world, document management needs were met by special purpose applications. Moving forward, this capability is delivered right within the platform without the need to integrate another vendor's app. Let's learn about another CloudSuite tech in this vein, the integrated request and approval functionality called action requests. Chirag, can you give us a rundown on action requests?
Sure. So if I talk about action requests, they are a way of automating your manual processes, which includes approving of certain actions like terminate, changing a pay rate, promotion, etc. It can also be used to create reports automatically and emailing them to the recipients. It can also be used to create reports for interfaces and putting it on the vendor's third-party server. Now, there are two types of action request workflows. One which has approval nodes and the data is entered into the system once it goes through all the approval processes. Secondly, scheduled workflows, which are mainly used for interfaces and creating reports which runs on a scheduled basis. If I talk about actions, there are three types of actions. The first one is instance action, which is approved instantly and it does not trigger a workflow. Second is update action. It may or may not trigger a workflow and updates the already existing data in the system. And the third is create action. This also may or may not trigger a workflow and is used to create new records in the system. Now, if I talk about action rules, which are used in the action request, there are two kinds of action rules. One is entrance rule, which is used to control the submission of an action. You can enter certain conditions in the entrance rules, and the user will only be able to submit the action once all the condition on the entrance rule is satisfied. The second is exit rule, which is used to trigger another action or a workflow once the original action is complete. You can link a new service definition in the exit rule, which will trigger a new workflow. Now, there are many actions which are delivered by default in your Infor system, but Infor also has a vast capability of modification, and you can create your own actions and control the functionality of the system. Now, types of actions which you can create are, the first one is action extension. This is a copy of delivered action, which also creates a duplicate action form. After creating the action extension, you can modify the workflow linked with this action and modify the form to control the field's value. Please note, most of the actions are associated with only one business class, and only the fields of that associated business class can be changed, nothing else. For example, terminate action is associated with the employee business class, and all the fields which are part of the employee business class will be editable on the terminate action form. The second type of action which you can create is user request action. This is a custom action you can create for your business needs. You can have an update or a create user request action. To add the fields on the action form, you will have to add the parameters, which will automatically add the fields on the action form. You can also have exit and entrance rules entered on the action requests.
Right, thanks, Chirag. So those action requests, like the user request action, those action requests with approval nodes, they're all about putting a choice in front of a decision maker, right? So depending on which technology is used to present that choice to an end user and gather their response, you might have CloudSuite configured to use the in-basket or the in-box to handle those approvals. Chris, what's the difference?
Yeah, so thanks, Stout. So there are a few differences to note, including some pretty cool functionality with the inbox, as well as some things to consider. So the first difference is going to be where each one is accessed. So the inbox can be accessed from Mingle as soon as a user logs in, whereas the in-basket is going to be accessed from within the application, either FSM or GHR, depending on which one you're in. The second difference is going to be what can be viewed within each one. So the inbox is actually going to show you those action requests from both FSM and GHR, whereas the inbox is only going to show you one or the other depending on which system you're in. The third one is kind of some new functionality with the inbox that's pretty cool. It's an out-of-office function. So just like a regular email client, you can set out-of-office messages. The same kind of principle applies to the inbox as well. So kind of some pros of that out-of-office functionality within the inbox. Rules can be set up to check subject lines for messages coming in. For example, an invoice. And if you're out of office, anything with that invoice subject line can be routed to a delegate. That way, a delegate can take action for you. In the same kind of vein, start and end dates can be set for these as well. And it's important to remember the first person that approves, whether it's you or the delegate, will complete the action for everyone. The other thing within the inbox is that it has a search feature. So when you're getting a bunch of those action requests from both systems, you can search for keywords or requisition numbers, whatever it may be, and the inbox will highlight those for you. So it just kind of makes it easier to find. Some things to consider with the inbox, some things that we've seen. There is no way to control who that work gets delegated to. So an example of this, someone with the highest approval level can delegate work to, for whatever reason, they delegate it to their secretary who has no, financial knowledge or HR knowledge. There's no way for an admin to control that. So what we've seen clients kind of, do is set up policies, within their organization to say, whoever delegates that work is responsible for the action that the delegate takes. The other kind of thing to consider with this is this out-of-office functionality is a global setting. So, this is either going to be able to be done for everybody or no one at all. Another thing that we've seen is there's no way for an admin to set an out-of-office message for a delegate, right? So, or for someone who is out of office and forgets to set that message, right? So if they don't remember to set it before they leave, that work is just going to sit in their inbox until they return. From an admin and manager perspective, with people that have access to all levels of approval, the inbox can tend to get a little cluttered. So they're not only going to get their approvals, they're going to get messages for others as well. And then if using the inbox and an approval takes place from the in-basket, it's not going to delete that approval message from the inbox. Someone will actually have to go in and delete that, even though that action's already been taken from the in-basket.
All right, great. Thanks, Chris. Sounds like there's a little bit of nuance there between that inbox and in-basket, even though they're really both facilities for approval of IPA workflows. So, speaking of IPA, Infor Process Automation, that's a tool that we here at RPI have been passionate about for a long time. there are a few key differences with IPA in the cloud versus an on-premise solution. And consequently, this impacts our development techniques. Jeremy, what can you tell us about these changes and how clients can adapt their flows?
So some of the biggest changes with IPA in the cloud versus an on-premise installation is the loss of the SQL command and system command nodes, and also how you interact with data files in the system. IPA developers have been using those nodes to write more complicated data queries and to manipulate and interact with files and other hard-to-get pieces of information or data. Let's start with the data files. With an on-premise installation, IPA developers generally would have access to the Landmark server file system and can create directories for moving and manipulating all their data files. So this would be interface files coming in and out, etc. In a multi-tenant cloud environment, you don't have that server access, file system access. What you do have is the PFI file storage business class. In your flow, your local files can be written to and read from using the regular file access and data iterator nodes. However, the system looks for the files that you reference using those nodes in that PFI file storage business class and works with them directly from there. You're also, when your CloudSuite system is provisioned, you're also provisioned an FTP site with your CloudSuite applications. This is how you'll move your files to and from your CloudSuite system. The FTP node in IPA can be configured to use the Infor provision site, or you can use your own FTP site if your organization has one set up, as long as it's available from the outside of your organization's firewall. That's important because your CloudSuite application needs to be able to talk directly to that site. As far as getting data queries, users must now largely rely on the Landmark transaction node to get data out of the system. And into it as well, for that matter. Getting fields from a related business class is possible, but within the builder, you're limited to one related business class. If you know the relationships between the business classes, you can add them to your Landmark query directly in the query editor window. But if you do go back in and use that GUI editor, they do go away and you have to put them back in. Where I found the real power comes with IPA and some of the nuances now being in a multi-tenant environment is using Configuration Console to modify the business classes, adding derived user fields, conditions, user relations, and user actions as well. With the derived and conditional fields, you can pull in related data from other business classes, do some complex logic, and reformat data. For example, if your requisition approval flow, your purchase requisition approval flow, needs to know how many lines are on a requisition, you can create a derived field on the header that is just a count of the requisition line relations and return that in a query from that pulling in the header information instead of another query to go through and pull all the lines and return the record count. I also like to build conditional user fields in a business class to help with flow logic. Instead of pulling in several fields potentially from multiple business classes and several different queries, I build that logic within a derived field in Configuration Console. Then that way I'm returning a single true-false value from a business class that I'm already querying in my flow. Once I have that, then I can put those simplify the branch conditions within that branch node and minimize the number of queries that I'm actually calling and running in my flow. Custom user actions can also be used to simplify processing within your flows. I've written several user actions to update one or more business classes and to do some complex logic, checking to determine what data should be written out. So within a flow, for example, I can call a single action with the Landmark transaction node, and that action is a custom user action to execute the LPL that I wrote in the action editor within Configuration Console. And as Chirag mentioned earlier, user entrance rules can also be applied to these actions to validate that data and return an error message if the data doesn't meet the requirements for the business. Again, this takes more processing out of the IPA flow and puts it into an LPL code block within Configuration Console. I see a lot of clients using IPA as an interface engine still, so any performance gains that you can get from your IPA flows is to your advantage.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. That is a sort of interesting change in paradigm where, in the Lawson world, you could write SQL queries, make any sort of arbitrary joins you wanted. Here in the CloudSuite world, that's not the case, but you have that ability to extend the data model in the application by adding user fields, which then become available in your landmark queries. So that's a sort of fascinating turn of events there, and I'm glad to hear that IPA is still a great tool for interfaces. It has been our go-to tool for interfaces in the Lawson world. CloudSuite does introduce some additional methods for integrating to other systems. John, you touched on the file creation utility before. What can you tell us more about these different interface tools available to CloudSuite?
Yeah, as Jeremy had mentioned, IPA is still the bulk of the tools that we're going to be using for this, but there are a couple of other tools that are delivered that definitely will help you out. As I had mentioned before, we've got the file creation utility, and that will work if you are using Infor HCM and you need to get data out of Infor HCM over to a vendor. And so that's a great tool and that I had already talked about. But another tool that you can be using for developing your interfaces is actually the Infor Ion tool set. This is a new tool to a lot of people in the Infor Lawson world. Infor Ion is similar to IPA, but it has many powerful components that definitely set it apart from IPA. With Infor Ion Connect, you can establish connections between applications, which can either be Infor applications or third-party applications. Infor Ion will be using business object documents, or BODs, to send data or to receive data from those third-party applications. For those of you that are not familiar with BODs, BODs are XML documents that is a generic representation of a business object. They typically contain data relating to that business transaction, such as a sales order or an invoice, or to your master data, such as your customers or items. There are many Ion connectors actually already developed in the Infor Financials, Infor Supply Chain Management, and Infor HCM applications that you can modify to fit your needs. A key component of Ion that I think is one of my favorite parts of it is actually the Ion desk. And that is where you can monitor the messages that are going back and forth, the documents, and the statuses of the BODs that are being sent and received. And this is extremely helpful for troubleshooting or analyzing any of the data that has been sent or received. So as you can see, that there are many options, and we're confident that you can definitely replace any of your COBOL or script-based interfaces that you have in Lawson, either using IPA, using Ion, or using the file creation utility.
All right. Well, thanks, John. It's great to see that Infor is committed to an open platform with various interface and reporting technologies, though it can be overwhelming to take on all these tools at once. With interfaces, effective requirements gathering is key to triaging development needs, and I think the same goes for reports. So let's pivot back to reports and dive more into that requirements gathering process. Aaron, what are some best practices for soliciting requirements for role-based dashboards and analytics?
Sure. So best practices to keep it simple. Often when we're working with customers in different organizations, they try to leverage complex methodologies and processes that often end up just burning a lot of time and really failing to achieve the clarity that's desired, right, regarding your reporting requirements. So we're careful to set the expectation that when you get started, developing requirements, it's an iterative process, right? So, and basically what that means is, when you set out to develop certain reports and analytics, you're not going to know exactly what you need when you start, but you're going to figure it out by basically taking that work and breaking it into small chunks and doing that iteratively. So one of the ways that we recommend, the best way to get started is to just go ahead and pick 3 to 5 KPIs, right, for the area that you're working with. And then also think about 2 to 4 ways of how you'd want to view that data. And so to help illustrate what I mean by that, so let's say, example, you're wanting to analyze turnover, right, for your organization. So let's say we're going to pick, our KPIs are going to be turnover rate. We want to know length of service. We want to know time and position. And then think about a few different ways of how you'd want to view those numbers or see that those data points trended over time. So for example, you may want to do it by department, by supervisor, by job category, and then also by reason codes, right? So what you can do then is you can mix and match those different attributes together to look at the data from different perspectives. So it gives you a highly interactive and dynamic way to look at turnover in your organization. So, we recommend, start with that. Again, pick the KPIs, pick a few different ways you want to view it, prototype it, build it out, get feedback, make changes, build it again, and get feedback, and iterate through that process, because we've often found that taking a more agile approach works best, because you can't really use that waterfall method, right? You can't define all of the specific requirements and details up front, but what you can do is you can look at something and say, this is good, but we need to change this, and then iterate over time, and it'll quickly evolve into something that's very useful to your organization. So we found that that's the best approach for working with our customers to solicit requirements and then to build those role-based dashboards quickly that everybody's looking to implement as part of their project.
All right, great. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, glad to hear you've got some techniques in the bag for rapidly implementing reports and analytics here with the Burst platform, all the tools we have available in CloudSuite. So now let's address some of the questions submitted by our audience so far. All right, here's one question here. I think this will be a good one for Aaron. Hey, Aaron, we currently use Crystal Reports and LBI for a lot of reporting. Will we be able to use Crystal Reports to get data from Global HR or CloudSuite HCM?
Okay. Yeah, so the answer to that question is no. And the reason is, in the past, right, you've had direct relational database access, right? So you could go in and interrogate the different tables, right, within the system, and you could query SQL, right, directly against that using LBI or Crystal Reports or whatever your tool of choice was. But going forward, you have to go through, access it through a different means. So you can either use the tools that are within the application, so you can use list views or standard reports that are embedded within GHR, or you can use the Infor Analytics platform, which includes a tool that's similar to Crystal Reports called Designer, that's part of the Burst product line, and then also Visualizer for creating those role-based dashboards and visualizations that people are looking for.
All right, thanks. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box here and on 24, so I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. Big ups to our panelists. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to me and share your wisdom on CloudSuite. And thanks everyone who attended. Stay tuned to our CloudSuite series. We have another panel discussion coming up next week. Thanks. Have a great weekend.